In this video, we will present you the results of our participation in the competition Data Mining the Water Table. We are team data divers with me, Robin de Haas, Dieter van de Sande and Separenti. We will start straight away with the data exploration. The goal is to predict for each water pump sample one of three labels: functional, functional needs repair, or non-functional. This target is clearly categorical, and you could even say it is somewhat ordinal in the degree of functionality. We might be able to exploit this ordinality in our algorithms later on. There's also clearly severe class imbalance present, but since accuracy is what is stipulated as quality assessment tool, this will be less problematic than it could be, since overall accuracy is more important than accuracy on a minority class. We have 40 features available to base our predictions on. Some of these features are numerical, other features, most of them, are categorical. Some features are clearly redundant with a one-on-one correspondence between them, so we might need to drop some. And some features are just highly correlated, which could mean we have to drop them or merge them. There are features that are informative at first sight. As you can see, when the quantity is dry, the status group will almost definitely be non-functional. Other features are not that informative at first sight, but since this is just a univariate analysis, we didn't exclude them just yet. Now to data pre-processing. We see in this missingness overview that most missing value problems aren't really sample related. There aren't many problems row-wise. Most are feature related, so column-wise. This is why we focused on fixing features instead of really focusing on specific problematic samples. For the imputation of missing categorical values, we simply merge all representations for missing values into one new unknown category per feature. We kept a separate category for unknown values because most features have quite a bit of missing values, and they generally have a different distribution than the majority category. We did not want to lose this information. In the numerical case, all missing values were represented as zeros. First, we needed to make sure 0 was not a valid value for that feature, and then we could impute the missing values by either the median, in case of highly skewed data, or by the geographic mean. What is the idea behind this geographic mean? Well, it is expected that, for example, a feature like longitude will have a better approximation if we only consider samples in its geographic vicinity for computing the mean. So first we only looked at samples inside the same ward to compute the mean for that missing value. If we did not find it in the ward, then we looked at the region for computing the mean. And only as a last resort, we computed the global mean using all samples for imputing that missing value. We also created two new features: pump age, the age of the pump, since this could possibly have an influence on functionality, and season, which uses seasonal binning on the recording date, since it seems plausible that dry seasons can be more problematic in terms of functionality. One thing we also did was splitting or merging levels. A good example of why this merging can be important is Thunder. Thunder had 2000 levels, of which some seemed very populated and seemed important, but a lot of them were too small to be informative. We decided to not drop the feature as a whole, but just merge all levels that represent less than 1% of samples. As feature selection, we both did manual dropping of redundant features and performed the well-known MRMR on our one-health encoded features to prevent dimensionality problems. We kept 80 features. Finally, our pre-processing pipeline. After creating the new features, we handle the numerical and categorical data separately. What is kind of important to note here is that we still need some categorical information to compute the geographic mean for numerical data. Also, all categories are converted to lowercase to prevent data entry mistakes involving casing. We also have two output objects: the pre-processed training data and an information object for pre-processing test data later on. This object contains scaling information, means, etc. from the training data. Also, our pipeline is somewhat configurable, since one-hot encoding, MRMR, and scaling are optional parts.
For this part of the project, we tested multiple models. We will highlight the following models more in depth: k-nearest neighbors, neural networks, and random forests. We start by exploring the k-nearest neighbors model. To be able to calculate the Euclidean distance, we need to use the one-hot encoded version of the categorical variables. We will also need to have the data scaled, and to mitigate the curse of high dimensionality, we filter the number of variables using MRMR. In the graph, we can see that for a small number of neighbors, we can add more neighbors to the model to have a better accuracy. When having too many neighbors, the variance of the predictions would be too high. This is a clear example of the bias-variance trade-off. We can see that the maximum accuracy is reached using 7 neighbors, which is way smaller than the default square root of the number of samples. The maximum accuracy reached using KNN was 77.5%. This is a good baseline model since KNN is quite fast and the accuracy is not that bad. Nevertheless, the classification rate of functional needs repair is poor, mostly due to the imbalanced dataset. Now we will look a bit further into neural networks. The most important hyperparameters are the number of nodes in the hidden layer and the decay, which is a parameter that penalizes high-value weights to avoid overfitting. We first tuned the number of hidden nodes. The best number of hidden nodes seem to be 30, so that we have enough complexity in the model, but we do not overfit the model on the training data. The decay is by default equal to 0. We see that when we increase the decay, the accuracy seems to increase slightly. The accuracy and the confusion matrix of a neural network are comparable to the one of k-nearest neighbors. However, it should be noted that neural networks' computational cost is a lot higher than KNN's computational cost. A random forest combines bagging and random feature selection to reduce the variance of multiple non-pruned decision trees. The two main hyperparameters we tuned are the number of variables per tree and the number of trees that forest consists of. On this slide, we show the influence of the number of variables per tree on the accuracy. When having less than 4 variables per tree, we have too little information per tree. Nevertheless, when we add too many variables to each tree, the trees are mutually correlated, which reduces the accuracy of the random forest. The graph on this slide shows that when the accuracy of a random forest has converged, adding more trees will neither increase nor decrease the accuracy. Since it seems that the random forest has converged after 200 trees, we used 200 as the optimal value for the number of trees. Random forest had a high accuracy of 81.2% with a low standard deviation on the cross-validated accuracy. However, random forests are still suffering from the imbalanced dataset. In this slide, we compare the presented models to a few others we tested. We see that random forest is the best model among them. We created a submission to the DrivenData contest using a random forest trained on a whole dataset and received an accuracy of 81.72% on the test set.
The last section of our report consists out of alternative models. Here we combine preprocessing and model selection to generate a learner with a higher accuracy. There were 3 strategies tried in this last section. Gradient boosting trees with the library XGBoost, an ensemble of models in which we combine gradient boosting trees and random forests, and lastly we experimented with k-nearest neighbors using principal components analysis. I will quickly summarize these 3 approaches. It made sense to use a gradient boosting tree model, as we saw from the previous section that tree-based models performed well. The gradient boosting tree model is a model in which weak learners in the form of decision trees are trained iteratively in a number of rounds. Each tree tries to correct the errors made by the previous ones. The combination of these weak learners form together a strong learner. There are some hyperparameters to tune, you can see them on the left. All these parameters were grid searched, and on the right we can see one of the multiple plots generated from these grid searches. This shows the cooperation between 3 parameters: shrinkage or learning rate, the max depth of the tree, and also the number of rounds. From this plot we can see clearly that a lower learning rate translates to a slower convergence. The resulting model, after the grid search, achieved an accuracy of 81.4%, which is quite good. In the confusion matrix, we also see that functional reaches high accuracy, but this is at the cost of the other classes. Functional needs repair still has the worst accuracy. The second strategy we tried were ensemble models.
Our best performing models are complex models like gradient boosting trees and random forests. So we decided to try an ensemble which combines a couple of these models into one learner. Using majority voting with a couple of complex models could have a beneficial effect. First, we combined 5 gradient boosting trees, each trained with another random seed. Next, we tried 2 boosting trees and 2 random forests. This is a combination of more varying models which could also have a beneficial effect. And lastly, we tried 5 gradient boosting trees in which one tree was trained on a weighted training set. As said before, the training data is highly unbalanced. This was challenged by adding higher weights to the low frequency classes and lower weights to the high frequency classes. This is a feature provided by XGBoost. The rationale behind this is that the balanced learner could act as a tiebreaker when the other learners don't agree. On this slide, we see the achieved accuracy of each ensemble model and also of each individual learner. In general, the ensemble accuracy is not significantly higher than the individual learners. We do see some increase in the combination of gradient boosting trees and random forests in the middle. This could be because the two models have different strengths and combining these is beneficial. It would be interesting to experiment this ensemble and to try even more varying models together, but this wasn't done for this project. The last strategy we tried was a combination of k-nearest neighbors and principal component analysis. We saw that KNN performed relatively well considering the simplicity of the model. It performed better than artificial neural networks, for example. We know the problem with KNN is that they start performing worse as the dimensionality increases. That is why we tried principal component analysis to reduce the dimensionality and then perform KNN. We did a grid search on the amount of principal components and the amount of neighbors. We noticed that 5 neighbors performed best for all amounts of components. In the plot, we see the results of a 5 nearest neighbors model cross-validated with different numbers of principal components. We see that between 30 and 80 components, the accuracy is more or less stagnant. 50 components performed best, but the difference with 30 is not significant. This is a very simple model with still a good accuracy. I will end this presentation with a small conclusion. We did a very extensive feature analysis, as there was a lot of redundant data. Tree-based models outperformed all our other models in our project. But as the no free lunch theorem says, there is no single model which will always do better. Class imbalance had a big effect on our accuracy, which is seen in the bad performance on the functional needs repair class. We ended with some ensemble models in which we used a combination of random forests and gradient boosting trees as our final model. This model achieved a submission accuracy of 81.8%. That was our presentation. Thanks for listening.